Okay, my name is Felix, and I'm a recovered addict. And first of all, I want to thank you for having an opportunity to share a little bit of my story or some rendition thereof. Um, my recovery, I feel like I need to be willing to embrace new experiences. And, you know, I have not been to that many Zoom meetings yet. I just started doing that a matter of a few months ago, and trying to convey a message across Zoom has its own challenges. A lot of you have had a lot of experience in doing this, but I may touch on this more later. But I did. I had long-term sobriety at one point, and I relapsed and I ended up back in prison for 11 years, and I've only been out of prison not even 9 months yet. So I've rapidly adapted to a lot of the technology, but getting the feel for being able to share across Zoom is a new experience yet again. There's a lot of new experiences going on. And I want to thank the people that have kept this meeting going. It come to my attention how dwindled down that some of our meetings in this fellowship in this town have become. And I feel a privilege and honor and a responsibility to try to contribute my part, and definitely give recognition to those people that have, when there's so few people showing up, still to keep the lights on and keep things moving forward, and have the hope to look forward that one day it's going to turn into something. And so you're here when I got here, and it's because of that. Um, sometimes I bring this up. I used to live farther up north, and if you take the highway from Wickenburg down to Quartzsite, there's a little tiny hole in the wall town, little town in between there called Hope, Arizona. And if you drive through Hope, Arizona, the little one-horse town, and after you get through it, you look up on the left-hand side of the road, you'll see a sign there that says, "You are now beyond hope." I always got a kick out of that every time I drove by that, and that's stuck in my head. And in recovery, a lot of things come back to me, and I see the significance of a lot of things that have happened along the way. And I know the program talks a lot about how it's a hopeless state of mind and body. The way we have in our reading, we talk about it. We got an obsession of the mind, allergy of the body, and I think every one of us has our own subjective interpretation of what that hopelessness was like. And I feel like I could definitely qualify. I'm the type of dope fiend that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is. Anything that I've had enough access to for a long enough period of time, I've just about killed myself doing it. And I definitely had my rounds with coke. When I first got to Arizona in 1992, I was astounded at the quality and the price of cocaine on the streets in the middle of Phoenix at that time. And I commenced to start shooting a half ounce a day. And it didn't take long for me. And I was definitely on the getting near killing myself. I did a lot of damage on that run. And it just doesn't matter what the drug is. I found acid when I was 18. I lived on acid for 6 months and ended up down to 145 pounds. And for a guy that's almost 6 foot tall, I look like a bag of bones, no doubt. I didn't realize that, but anything, it didn't matter. And while I can definitely identify with being an addict, of having all the characteristics of an addict, and addiction drove me nearly to death many a time. In the reading, it talks about that our real problem wasn't cocaine or any other drug, but it was the disease of addiction. And I don't know if I would really label it as addiction, but a lot of people talk about the problem was me, right? And some people say, my name is, and the problem is me, and I'm an addict, or some rendition thereof. And I can really identify that there was a serious problem right from the get go. I know that. Well, I suppose that probably I was born into this world powerless and couldn't manage my own life, and probably my parents were my first higher power. And somewhere between the ages of 0 and 5, I started taking over managing my life. and making a mess out of it. And that became real apparent as soon as I hit kindergarten. And I remember quite distinctly being in kindergarten and seeing the group of kids off to my left and sensing somehow or another that I did not belong over there with them. And there was this other guy that was getting in a lot of trouble all the time. And I seen him over to my right, sitting by himself, and thinking to myself, I wonder if I belong over there with him. And that sense of inferiority, don't fit in, different than everybody else, it's readily recognizable already at that point. And I was thinking a little bit today about some of the other experiences that I haven't even really shared along the way that come to light in my recovery. And one of those is a mere couple of years later when I was in second grade, and we got 3 new kids in class that year. And I remember thinking to myself, well, those kids don't have any idea what's been going on for the last 2 years. Maybe I'd have a shot at making a friend with one of those. And I don't remember what happened, but I do remember thinking that somewhere in the back of my head. And by third grade, I was already getting in so damn much trouble. I started seeing a counselor and the school psychologist, and my life was always a freaking mess. I was always getting in trouble for something. For a lot of years, I referred to myself as a black sheep. This pervasive idea in the back of my head that there was something wrong with me was persistent throughout my life. And although my years growing up, I got in a lot of trouble along the way. And today, I feel I feel a little sympathy and I wouldn't say guilt. I feel empathetic towards my parents and what I put them through. My entire life growing up, somebody was always calling them some shit that I had pulled. I got picked up for shoplifting when I was 9 years old, and I made the front page of the newspaper for the string of felonies at the age of 12. And this stuff was going on before I ever picked up drugs or alcohol. I got drunk at 11, and at 12 and 13, I started. Things were a lot different back then than they are today. The kind of drugs were just not available in a small town in northern Wisconsin, and so I started looking for whatever I could find. Reading talked about that as well. That we did whatever we could get our hands on, whatever we could find. And at that time, in that place, about the only things that I could find that would have any effect on me was things like sniffing gas and lighter fluid and paint and glue and drinking occasionally. The first time that I got drunk at age 11, I consumed so much alcohol that I should have ended up in the hospital. They didn't know back then what they know today. And I made the decision that alcohol was not for me. I mean, I liked the effect it produced, but I didn't like throwing up 21 times. That was the after effect of that was not pleasant. And so then I started searching on other things. And eventually in my teen years, I learned how to drink, and not have to end up so sick. Or eventually, if I knew I was going to get sick, then I would force myself to throw up so that I could go back to drinking more. It just didn't matter what it was. Anything that would produce that effect. They give me a head change, whatever you want to call it. So, these are. I come to believe that, however God has made me, whatever my reactions to life have been, coupled along with this element of addiction, with the physical craving that occurs. And once I start, I lose control over what and how much I use. There's no doubt about all that. And that after a while, when I really gave an honest effort to try and quit, I feel like I've learned every lesson along the way the hardest way possible, to the degree that many times over it should have killed me. And learning that it's the first one that gets me, not the last one, that was a death-defying lesson. And then trying to quit, not being able to quit, and learning the mental aspect of this, that I keep going back to that. And I said it for many, many years, that if there's two things that I know about life in this world for me, is one is that I keep breathing. The other one is sooner or later, one way or another, I go back to getting high. And I was absolutely convinced of that for the longest time. by the age of 17, I was already willing to go out and commit felonies in order to support my habit and getting busted for, well, probably by the age of 15, but it took to 17 before they were willing to lock me up for it. And sometimes I share this experience because it talks about in the book, about being able to control and enjoy it, you know. And when I've looked back and examined my experiences, the first evidence that I can find that I could either control it or enjoy it, but not both, was at my 18th birthday. And I don't really. I was with my then to be wife and my newborn son and my parents and my brother, and I don't even remember anything really that happened that day because I had gotten out of juvie and I had been through treatment twice already by that point. I got introduced to the big book when I was 17 in the first treatment center I went to. And I had gotten a hold of some weed, but I was trying to portray like I was keeping my shit together, right? I didn't want people to really, for it to be obvious that I was stoned. And so I kept trying to sneak away from them and go smoke some weed, but I didn't want to smoke too much because then I would look like I'm stoned. I didn't want them to see that. So my whole day was consumed with this whole idea of trying to control it or enjoy it. And I fought with that, obsessed with that idea. And every time I get back into their company, then it seemed like I'm not high enough. I should have smoked some more. And I can't wait for the next time to figure out to get away from them, try and smoke some more. And that's the battle that went on. And I completely missed the stuff that was going on around me. And that's part of what I strive to accomplish in my recovery today. There's just a lot of things that was so self-absorbed, so living in a state of fear in my own head, that I wasn't interacting with the world around me. I was unaware with what really was going on around me. And, you know, and I'm a big book guy. And in my recovery these days, I'm big on that. And, you know, I'm going to the rehabs and handing books out, and anybody that I can get that's interested enough, I try to get in the book, and I quote the book quite frequently. I mean, to me, that's been a guide for life, and they have experiences in there. And if I try to understand what their experiences that they're explaining there, and look for the similar type of experience throughout the course of my life, it brings new truth. It brings new awareness. And I grow, and so. um, it's obvious looking back that I was full blown by 18 and or shortly thereafter. There was no more somewhere between 18 and 19. There was no controlling it or enjoying it anymore. There came the bar scenes and the dope houses and the needles and the this and that and the other thing. And another experience that I like to share is about the needle situation, because talk about we use for the effect that it produces, right? And you know, I hate needles. I had to do an MRI again at the beginning of the week, and they stick a needle in my arm, and I can't even look at it. I get queasy. I've hated them all my life. But the funny thing is I was maybe 21 or so, and I sold some coke to a biker in a park one day, and he commenced to shooting that stuff up, and I'd never seen anything about it. Hear about it on TV or something, but at that time and in that place, that was not prevalent like it is today. That shit really didn't happen, and he commenced to do that in my vehicle, and now there was no stopping him. He was going to do what he was going to do, and I watched the effect that it had on him, and I listened to him for the next half hour, going on and on and on about how high he was, and within a week I had a needle in my arm after that. And I like to use that as an example of, like, in the second step, it talks about we came to believe. And, you know, my mind can make a lot of shit up, but what my eyes see and my ears hear and my body feels forms a fundamental belief that's a real belief. It's not some wishful thinking. It's not some shit that my mind made up. And I've come to understand that by looking back at that experience, because even though I have hoarded needles, that is the process that I went through to end up with a needle in my arm. And then I felt what the effect. I understood what using drugs in that form was going to do for me. And that formed such a belief that as soon as I start using anything in a very short period of time, and that's what I'm doing. I'm hunting down something that's going to go in a needle, whether it be heroin or meth or coke or anything that's going to give me that kind of an effect. In the doctor's opinion, they talk about this elusive sensation, right? And to me, I've narrowed that down. I've heard a lot of people talk about they were chasing the first high, and that's not my experience. My experience was once it got bad enough, I was chasing the kind of high where I was trying to get my good feelings and my good thinking left turned on, and my bad feelings and my bad thinking turned off, and then try to maintain that state for some period of time, which is impossible. I was chasing the impossible high. And the next best thing to that is to shut everything off, right? Remain conscious, hopefully not blacked out, but to shut everything off. And that's what I found, that during those moments while I was injecting drugs, it shut everything off. And that's a very brief period of time. The rush that came afterward was did a fairly good job of keeping things shut off. It detracted my attention away from my miserable life and the suffering that was going on inside of me and all the fears that plagued me all of my life that only ever got worse, never better. But it was only those moments right there where literally the switch was turned off. And I felt like that's what I was condemned to do. I was condemned to chop down mountains and do whatever it takes to sit there and just keep shooting up over and over and over and over. And it's only by the grace of God that I lived through that. My bouts of really being out on the streets and being able to use the way that I want to use in the amount of years that I've been an adult have been fairly short. Had long-term sobriety a couple of times, and I've been incarcerated for long periods of time. And during just those years of me living like that, it's done damage. You know, I got health issues that have been caused by that shit, and it's amazing that the damage that I had diagnosed at one point in time, actually, I attribute to my spiritual life that I've had conditions that they told me that I'm going to die from, and that my life is drastically shortened. And I've been going to specialists since I've been out, and they're telling me that I've improved, that I'm in a lot better condition than what they were telling me years ago that I was in. You know, and I pray about that, and I ask for healing power, and I've gone to very powerful prayer warriors and had them lay hands on me, and I've come to believe in that kind of thing. You know, I had some styes on my eye for a while when I was incarcerated for probably several years, and once I got clean and sober, and I really started living a spiritual life, and and started believing in whether they're toast up people or church people or whatever they are, but they're running into people that were powerful, and they're really about all that, and feeling like, wow, this stuff, there's something to this. This works. And having somebody lay their hands on me and pray for me, and me praying, I had tried everything I could to deal with the styes that were on the edge of my eyelid for several years with hot compresses and ointments and treatment and going to the doctor, trying. And finally, I come to the conclusion that they're there. They're not really bothering me that much. Just leave them the hell alone. Otherwise, I just aggravate them, and then they bother me, until I had a powerful experience where I went to a prayer circle and had hands laid on me. And within 3 days, to a day or 3 days, I don't remember exactly how long it wasn't long, and they were gone. I mean, I had him praying for my liver and praying for my knee and stuff like that. And I went and looked in the mirror one day, and it dawned on me. I looked at them, and they were gone. And I've had experiences like that, what some people might consider miraculous healing. And now a similar things are happening with my liver. It's in better shape now than it was 10 years ago. And cirrhosis is not supposed to get better. At the best, it's supposed to stay the same. So anyway, so from the age 18 to 25, I ran it in the ground, and you know, it's just a lot of wreckage, 5 drunk drivings, and countless trips to jail, a bunch of trips to treatment, a couple of trips to detox, a couple of short trips to prison, and divorce, and just wreckage. You know, that kind of a story. And you know, I hear some people talk about how insanity is trying the same thing repeatedly and expecting different results. And that is not what the program and the book talks about. That is not the insanity they talk about at all. And in a lot of ways, my experience doesn't hear that either. You know, I was trying a lot of things. And in 1992, I was on one deep I botched an armed robbery of a drugstore, and I burglarized another drugstore, and I was doing that kind of behavior. It was driving me to that point. I was willing to do what the hell ever it takes. I want more. I got to get more. And I knew by past experience that it was going to lead me back into prison. And prison is no kind of solution for a guy like me. And so I did what we call geographical, and I ended up coming from Wisconsin out here to Arizona, and just trying to do something different. And up to that point, I didn't really, despite the fact that I was in and out of the rooms, and I was subjected to some real honest ideas about staying clean and sober and recovery, things like that. I didn't grasp them. I just thought that I needed to get my life on track and keep it that way. And it seemed like it was just an impossible task to do. And so I held this belief, and I wasn't really that consciously aware of it, but there's this fundamental belief in the back of my head that there's got to be something wrong with me. When you go to treatment repeatedly, and it seems like other people think that should work for you, and there's other people that are showing up there saying, well, I went to treatment and it worked for me, and I expect it to work for me, and I get out, and I have every intention of staying sober, and in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, next thing you know, I'm drinking again, and next thing you know, I'm doing all these drugs again, and it's starting the same thing over again. There's only so many conclusions that a person can come to. And I think in the back of my head somewhere, I just concluded that there's something fundamentally wrong with me. And it just it doesn't work for me. It's never going to work for me. Um, so, uh, so I took off from Wisconsin, and to me, that was a pretty scary proposition. I lived my whole life there. I had an ex-wife and I had kids there, and my family was there. Everyone that I knew of in this world was there. And being as much of a social invalid as I've been most of my life, the prospect of having to go somewhere completely different, start over, was a very scary proposition. And as probably a combination of desperation or stupidity or running or whatever it was, I was driven enough to be able to cruise all the way across the country and land in Arizona. And when I left, I didn't have no idea where I was going. I had some idea that I'm going to drive south. It was October and it was cold. I don't wear a coat. I hate the cold. I'm going to drive south far enough till it warms up, and then I don't have to wear a coat anymore. And then I'll figure it out from there. Oh, that was my thinking at that time. And I had a great aunt living here, and so I landed in Phoenix. And I had this resolve. The book calls it all this resolve, right? That I have to get my life in order, and I have to keep it that way. There's nobody to bail me out anymore, and I'm in this huge city, and it's unthinkable what the jails and the prison system might be like here. So I have to do it. I have no other choice but to do it. And I still hung on the idea that I could get away with drinking as long as I didn't do heavy drugs, and especially that I didn't go back to shooting stuff up. And in a month, I set up a future for myself. I started working and saving money, got a driver's license, and got a car, and I registered for school, and did all the things that I knew that I needed to do in order to get my life on track. And then all I needed to do was follow through on it. And a sense of restlessness sets in. I would have never used that word before, but I'm a drug addict, and I need a rush. I need a sense of excitement. There's something that I need at a very deep level. And at that time, being in the condition that I was, my thinking is, wow, this is a huge city. There's got to be some really interesting shit going on around here. And so I started looking around. I started asking around. People are like, the place you're looking for is probably down on Van Buren. Van Buren, what's that? I'm gonna have to go find that. And that's what I found. And in the '92, we're talking about the height of the crack epidemic. We're talking about pure ether-based coke, readily available everywhere. And I'm like, hell yeah. and a matter of days go by, or weeks go by, or whatever, and it dawns on me, I'm heading down the same road that I've headed down before. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't let that happen again. I cannot let that happen here again. And, I did the same thing I've done a few times. And I'm like, I go find a garbage can and I throw all my paraphernalia in there. And that's going to stop me, right? And I'm like, can't let this happen again. I'll get rid of all my shit. 2-3 days later, I'm back down to this car wash, digging through the trash can, hoping the garbage man didn't pick it up by now. I can't quit. I start and I can't quit. And it did take long, a few weeks, and it landed back in jail. And I'm starting over in the state. So they held me for 9 months and they put me on a probation. And within 3 days, that obsession is on me. It's like, okay, I have the ability to get out of the facility that I'm in. I got $10 in my pocket. I want to get high. I can't seem to procure these drugs without breaking the rules. I'm like, fuck it. And I jumped the wall and I got on the town for the night. And that got me kicked out of that place. And that was the morning of August 17th, 1993. And while I was sitting there waiting for my PO to come show up and pick me up, something profound happened to me that morning. And I won't go into the details of that, but it was what I consider to be profound spiritual experience. I didn't realize that at the time, but it took my whole life on a different direction. And I went back to jail for a couple of weeks and got out, and I went to my seventh treatment center, which I was in residential for 17 months. And by that time, I already knew where there was an answer for a person like me. And they used the shotgun approach with the theories and the books and the RET and all this cognitive behavioral stuff and whatnot. And they threw everything at you, including 12-step stuff. But I knew by that point that the program in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous was probably the answer that I needed. And I got me a book, and I started working in the book at that point. And things improved for me. I stayed clean and sober. There was a change that took place within me. God had touched me, and I stuck with that through treatment. And when I got out of treatment and did the things that was suggested from the fellowship and was doing my best, mostly on my own. I had a sponsor, but he didn't really sit down with me a whole lot. And it didn't take long. I was probably around the 2-year mark, and I started going to school full time and working full time. And that's a heavy load. And I decided that what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my recovery on the back burner for a little while, at least till I graduate from school, get something off my plate, and be able to dedicate the time and the energy back to my mind convinced me that shit, and it was fall off things and focus all on that. And I never did get back to it. And I'm not quite sure. It must have been in God's plan, but somehow or another, I managed to stay clean for a long time after that. At 15 years of sobriety, materially, I was doing great. I was semi-retired for years with a 6-figure income and owned multiple properties and had all the toys that I ever wanted. And my attitude and my perspective of life that I had developed over that period of time was it's great that I learned how to stay clean and sober. I figured my step work that I did in the beginning was what was keeping me clean and sober, or God was keeping me clean and sober. But I thought the purpose of that was to give me the ability to go out there, make a bunch of money, and create an easy lifestyle, and be able to enjoy all the things I wanted to enjoy in life with toys and vacations and whatnot, and enable me. I still had an idea that the people and situations, the things that made me uncomfortable, was the source of my problems. So I'm going to use the resources that I accumulated to be able to move out into the desert, and I engaged in a very reclusive, isolated lifestyle. And at 15 years sober, that's where I was at. I was materially as fit as I wanted to be, and my daily life was spent luxuriously, riding on the desert and in Jeep and quads and going to the lake and fishing and taking vacations and what I thought was living, enjoying life. And I remember how sometimes that fear would set in, that I'd be worried about, am I going to have enough money to go on? Is my business going to collapse? Am I going to lose this? Fear would set in. And, that was the happiest I had ever been in life. I had nothing to compare it to. I had no idea the kind of joy and freedom that's available in recovery. I made enough money to buy enough things to lessen my fear down to a low, what I consider to be a manageable level. And that was my rendition of what being sober and being happy was like at that time. And I created messes. I stepped on people's toes, and they started retaliating, and things blew up at the end. I was in a bad relationship, and finally things started to crumble. And I started applying as much self-will as I could to try to manage all that, and that didn't pan out. And in about At 15 years sobriety is when the mess started, and I knew I felt deeply that something was going majorly wrong. And I struggled and I hung on for a year and a half or so till I was pushing 17 years of being sober. As soon as that stuff started happening in my life, I started running back to meetings. I brushed the dust off my book and got the book down off the shelf. I tried to backpedal and make up for lost time when I should have been focused on my spiritual condition, and I wasn't. And it didn't work. It was too little, too late. And I just didn't understand how to take inventory. I couldn't see that I was running on self will. I knew something was wrong, but I was drowning in fear and hate and self pity. These things that we talk about. And the inevitable day came. And Father's Day 2010, just weeks away from picking up a 17-year chip, I went to a meeting that day. And after that meeting, I went out with friends and had dinner and had some sober fun. And I'm driving home. And as I'm driving home, the switch went off in my head. And it's like almost with a click. And I just knew I was going to go get fucked up. I just knew that. My mind became consumed with the idea of how it was going to feel to be high or drunk again. And I had known by that point what happens once I start that I can't stop. And I knew where that ends. I'm going to lose everything and every one of any value in my life. And if I live through it, I'm going to be back in prison again. And I don't know how many years it's going to be for because I'm not in control of that either. All I can do is pray that it's going to be for a short period of time, not double digits. And it took about an hour and a half or so until I finally picked it up. And a few days later, it dawned on me, in Fred's story, he talks about I regained the ability to think straight, right? And that's what I can identify with. That a few days later, I'm standing there with a pipe in my hand, and I hadn't gotten high yet, and it dawns on me that everything that I'm looking at around me, my cars and my house and my life that I've built, that took me so many years, is all going to be gone. And if I live through it, I'm going to be back in prison. In a matter of seconds, that all just dawns on me, and a wave of fear runs through my body like I've never experienced. Palpable fear running through my body, knowing that's what's going to happen. I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? And I did the only thing I could do. I put the pipe up to my mouth and I lit it. And the book talks about that, of trying to blot out the consciousness of my intolerable situation as best as I can while I carry on to the bitter end. And in my experience, how I turn that is while I watch myself carry on to the bitter end, because having found some truths about the powerlessness and the hopelessness of being in that condition, I knew what was going to come. So it became this surreal experience, like I was watching myself do the very things that I would have given anything to not do. Within a week, I had a needle back in my arm again, and freaking out about it. And I can't let this happen. Running back to meetings, trying to stay clean, and the same cycle over and over until I throw the towel in, and I give in to my own sense of hopelessness. It's like there's no fucking use. I'm gonna have to ride this thing out. God's going to have to get me clean again. And until I go through what I have to go through, and he does that, there's nothing I can do but succumb to my own sense of powerlessness. And knowing that takes me to this different point of view, like I'm watching myself do that. And it took about 2.5 years until I burned through my resources. I racked up a list of felonies. I got arrested, and this time there's no getting out of jail. So I finally got arrested on the end of November 2012. And the main thing they arrested me for was for a drive-by shooting. And that's how I learned that, if I carry my resentments far enough out, I become homicidal, literally. And then after that incident, I ended up in an armed standoff with the cops. And they started coming out of a Jack Daniels induced blackout, laying face down my front yard with 5 cops on my back. I lose all control. I do incredible, absurd, tragic shit while drinking, and especially drinking in particular. So, ended up incarcerated from that point on, and that slows me down, but that doesn't stop me either. I can't stop unless I'm locked in a concrete box or I'm handcuffed to a bed. I don't stop. It's humanly possible until God relieves me of that. So I ended up going to jail, and I was drinking in jail. Ended up sent to prison. I ended up strung out on heroin in prison. I ended up back in jail for a couple of years on another case, and I was drinking myself silly in jail. My past experience both times now has shown me that it takes 6+ years for me to run it all the way into the ground, and then you just go circles. They talk about you hit your bottom, but you just circles at the bottom, and that's what it seems like. Countless days of praying that God end this, and I don't care if you get me sober or let me die. Just pick one, and it can't happen soon enough. I don't care. I need to get out of this. That misery and suffering today, I understand all the desperation of drowning man. Prison is doable, and suicide is an option. Going back to living like that for one more day is not an option for me. The misery, pain, and suffering of living like that day after day after day, I will do anything to not live that way. And it's been a long time that I've been convinced that I'm willing to do anything to not have to live that way. But I didn't understand that that means working a 12-step program the way it comes out of the book. Willing to go to any length to stay clean and sober is short lived. Eventually, that has to mean in step 12 that I'm willing to go to any length to try to help the next guy. And most of you here know that I'm involved in service work, and I'm still hunting down new guys. To me, they're my lifeblood. Finding a new guy and talking to him, and most of them don't stick around very long. They go in and out once in a while. One sticks, and once in a while I get I make a lifelong friend out of one of them. Those kind of things are miraculous to a guy like me. I started out talking about the sense of the inferiority and separation from people, and I've lived years out in the desert of almost alone. I had a girlfriend, but I couldn't tolerate her either, so I spent my time out in the desert alone most of the time. I couldn't deal with people, and I thought people were my problem. And by the time I got out of high school, I was already verbally saying countless times that if anybody got to know me well enough, eventually they would fall into one of two categories: either those that fear me or those that hate me. That's what I was convinced of. I could give you a list of experiences that back that up, that prove that. I had no idea. I had no idea that all that fear and all that hate was mine. And why I promote the inventory work they talk about in the book of the resentments and the fears, because now it's a process of unwinding that. It's a process of interacting with people, and when fear and resentment crop up, which they do, to be able to see, to own that, and then be able to do the solution that comes out of the book to be able to get past that and grow out of that. So I'm at about 7.5 years now. I don't put a whole lot of stock in that. I know that one of the attitudes that I developed previously was in the last years of my sobriety. Before, I had part of the attitude that I adopted was, well, I've been clean sober this long. I took it for granted that if I've been clean and sober the majority of my adult life, then I'm just going to remain that way from here on out. Whatever that secret answer was, I must have found it in the first time that I took a stab at doing the steps, or I wouldn't be clean and sober this long. And I put a lot of stock in that. And I try to point that out to people because I see that going on a lot. That there's so much reverence put into the number that's on that chip. And this time around, I just have such a different perspective on all that. I remember when I was relapsed and I would go to my home group, and there was people there with 25, 30, 35 years of sobriety, and they would give me this really genuine hug, and what they would say to me made it obvious that they were just glad to be able to see. They knew I was going through it, but they were happy to see when I showed up that I was still alive and I was still breathing. And they showed me that kind of unconditional love. And the people with 30 some odd decades of sobriety behind them, and they would say things like, "But for the grace of God, there go I. For all I know, tomorrow I'm going to be drunk or dead. I don't know that." They gave me the kind of experiences that today I didn't understand it at the time, but today in my recovery I do understand that all I have is right here, right now. Art and I were talking earlier today about staying in the present. My mind drags me out into the future and into the past and out of myself. It drags me out, and that's when I get plagued by that kind of stuff. And the discipline of this program is to stay right here, right now, and looking within me, because that is the only place that I find the connection to the God that I understand today. And the program has taught me that. And staying in that, the only reason I even carry chip around with me right now is because somebody gave it to me as a gift, and I can appreciate that. When chips show up in my life today, is because it's how they showed up to me. That's the important part of me, not the freaking number that's on that. All I have is today, and if I don't do something to maintain my spiritual condition today, tomorrow's tomorrow's Russian roulette, baby. So yeah, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to stay clean and sober. There's absolutely no doubt about that whatsoever. And because of the program that's in the book, I have some clear idea of what it takes to keep it that way. And it's a combination of things. In the instructions for the third step, it says that I give credit to his power, his love, and his way of life. And I frequently end meetings or shares with bringing that back out, because page 55 teaches us that his power is deep down within me, and that his way of life, as far as I'm concerned, is found in the first 164 pages of that book. And his love is found in a couple different ways. It's found in the fellowship that are in these rooms. It's found when I find a new guy that's suffering and miserable, and I can offer him some truth, and I can be a walking example of what this power has done for me in my life. And I can talk about experiences he can relate to. And obviously, by the way I'm transmitting that, I'm not the same guy I was back then. I'm not the same guy I was that walked out of prison after 11 years, just not even 9 months ago. It amazes me, his power, his love, and his way of life. So, again, I was talking to Art earlier about how finding new people is my lifeblood. In the book, in the pioneers of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, has helped show me what that looks like and how to go about that. And given an opportunity to be with guys that are relatively new to this, I hear this so often. Well, I go here and I go there and I keep giving my number out, and these people don't call me. So, where are you getting that idea from? The people who wrote this program, that isn't how they went about things. You have to get the numbers. And you have to engage with them people. You have to ask how they're doing. And today, Art's been my lifeblood. To be able to talk to him, he's starting on this path, and to show him what the pioneers of this program showed me, and has been working for me. It's my lifeblood. It brings that into my life that really not just keeps me clean and sober, but it makes me joyful about my sobriety. And I'll try to wrap up with this. Sometimes I go back to that story it talks about in the family afterward about the gone prospector, right? And the gone prospector, he strikes gold. At first tries to hug it all to keep it all to himself. He doesn't realize that he scratched a limitless load that he can mine for the rest of his life, and it'll pay him dividends as long as he insists on giving it all away. I think it's a real world kind of analogy that they give to try to give some idea about this power that we find right within us. And it's not my power. It doesn't belong to me, but I have access to it. And the catch to that is I can only use it selflessly. I have to be an instrument of that power going out and giving that away. And the real cool thing is, and sandwiched in the middle in there is that sentence, that dividend that pays back. It says, our joy from the release of a lifetime of frustration knows no bounds. Okay. And this is why in the beginning I talk about, addiction is part of it, but that's only one piece of the pie. Because my frustration for 50 years of my life was trying to figure out how in the hell other people seem to interact comfortably with each other. I wanted to know. And I was a people watcher for years trying to figure out what the hell the secret to that was. And when I engaged in this program, I got access to this power, going out, putting that power to work and trying to help the next guy. I'm involved in that process. Next thing you know, I got a host of friends, to have 300 contacts in my phone just never ceases to amaze me. When I'm feeling down and out, I'm laying on my bed and my back is killing me and I'm laying on ice. I got two right there. I can check out. I'm always meeting new people because I'm out there doing this thing. I'm doing the action part of it, and I'm accumulating new numbers. And there's always somebody I can say, hey, how you doing? Or I haven't talked to for a while, or how's it been, or whatever. And now starting to use it as another tool to be able to, do a group type thing. So endless supply of joy from the release of a lifetime of frustration. What frustrated me to no end is how to try to comfortably interact with other people. and in some form or fashion that's happening every single day in my life now, whether it be with the newest of new guys or whether it be with somebody that I've started to form more of a relationship with some people that are in the fellowship that I'm seeing on a regular basis, or in a setting like this, somehow or another every day that's happening. And call it joy if you will, call it hope, call it faith, call it power, call it, there's something that's going on in me that is definitely different now than it ever was for half a freaking century, frustrating the hell out of me. So going to run it all the way up to the end. Again, I really appreciate this opportunity to just spin a little yarn for you all tonight. And I definitely hope to see you again soon. We got a convention coming up this weekend. And if nothing else, to see all of you there and give you a hug and say hi to you and see how you're doing then. And that's all I got to say about that.